Today we're going to be talking about this kind of connection between a lot of different worlds that our audience lives in, that we live in.
Things have changed more with Google Ads, the online search world in the last 2 years than probably at any other point since 1998.
What have been some of the bigger projects you would say you've been a part of?
Two main areas I've had a lot of focus in are e-commerce sites and local service businesses.
So what is the playbook around paid ads versus SEO?
You have to make sure that the ad campaign is not just revenue positive, but it's profit positive.
What is a good and reasonable expectation of how many ads are going to hit?
Well, my general expectation with ads is it takes 2 to 3 months to dial in an ad campaign successfully.
What are the biggest mistakes you see people making?
I absolutely made this mistake myself 15 years ago.
All right, welcome back to the Niche Pursuits podcast. My name is Jared Bauman, and today we are joined by Vi Wickam with Wizard of Ads Online. Vi, welcome on board.
Thank you, Jared. It's a pleasure to be here.
You know, for those watching online, we got our color palettes perfect today. Your shirt
We nailed it.
Perfectly matches my background. Unfortunately, the podcast is listened to by well over 50% of our audience, so they won't see it, but that's okay. We can just know we were
missing out.
Missing out. There you go. Hey, so I'm excited about today's topic. I say that a lot, obviously, but today we're going to be talking about this kind of connection between a lot of different worlds that our audience lives in, that we live in online SEO, paid ads, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm excited for how you're going to bring that all together for us. Can you give us some background, though? Tell us a little bit about who you are before we dive in.
Well, I have been doing digital marketing since the mid to late 90s. Built my first website in 95, got paid to build my first website in 97, started running online marketing around 97 or 98 and helping businesses grow. And I've been through every step of the way from building websites with hand-coded HTML to building my own CMSs, to including headers and footers, to Joomla, and then really WordPress. I saw that WordPress in about 2007 was going to be the winner of the CMS wars, and have been mostly building on WordPress, but also things like Magento and Shopify for e-commerce since then. But running Google Ads was running Shopping 123 before Google bought it and made it Google Merchant Ads, shopping ads. Mm-hmm. So been a long ride and lots of fun. And truthfully, things have changed more with Google Ads and the online search world in the last 2 years than probably at any other point since 1998. It's just been a wild roller coaster, and really in the last few months, it's accelerated its pace.
Yeah, you checked all the nostalgic boxes for all of us listening. Many of us who've been in this space for a while will appreciate all of that. What have been some of the bigger projects you would say you've been a part of? You kind of mentioned a few high-level ones there, but where have you kind of spent your high-level time in the online space in that period?
So the two main areas I've had a lot of focus in are e-commerce sites, helping them grow and scale, and local service businesses, which technically often have terrible data to work from, and being able to set up integrations between CRMs and Google Ads and get the systems to talk to each other so that they have better data to work from. Which is a big, hairy problem to solve. And, it just so happens that when you can solve that well, people really appreciate it.
I think as we kind of get into some of what we're going to be talking about today, I'll frame it as SEO versus paid ads. And everyone listening knows that balance to some degree, whether they're doing it themselves, whether they land on one side of the coin vehemently or passively, or whether they're blending both. A lot of people blend both. Maybe let's start to get into that topic from your vantage point, and maybe start to share with us your vantage point on both the SEO world and the paid ad world.
Sure. So I would start with that Google Ads is generally a short-term play. You can put in money now, and within a couple weeks, you'll be probably money ahead if you're doing it well. And so if you can find a niche that works well for you, if you can find a low competition keyword, or realm of keywords that you can bid on, and you can bid smarter than your competitors, you can create a money machine that's always making money. The thing is, though, is there's no end game to it. There's no getting away from it. It's a game that you play to continue playing. Mm-hmm. SEO is a long game play. And really, that game has changed dramatically in the past 2 years, especially the last 18 months. But for the longest time, SEO has been the kind of thing where it's going to take you 2 or 3 months of hard work before it's going to show any impact. And then over time, you will continue to grow your body of content and your body of inbound links and your reputation online. And eventually you will have a solid business that's getting, and it may take you a couple of years of hard work before you are able to generate the level of traffic that is useful traffic, because as you and I both know, lots of SEO people who you're hiring to do your SEO will get you rankings for keywords that aren't ever going to make you any money. You got to get the keywords, you got to rank for the keywords that matter with content that's going to move the needle and convince actual humans to buy the thing that you want to sell. That you can have a really solid business running with a couple of years of solid investment in time and effort. And so it's the trade-off of time versus money and short-term versus long-term gain. And for most businesses, they have to play both games because most businesses don't have the staying power to just pour money into SEO pursuits for a couple of years before they're really, getting a positive ROI, which you might be positive ROI after 6 or 9 months of SEO work, but you've got to really push before you're going to see real ROI on SEO. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of fundamentally how I differentiate the two. If you're wanting to run testing on content, for conversion rates and things like that, obviously because ads is a short-term, play, it's more testable and you can use it for that kind of purpose in a way that you can't really do with SEO. And that the whole SEO game has changed dramatically in the past, really even the last 6 or 9 months, but starting in was it November 22 when ChatGPT launched? Mm-hmm. From that moment, SEO fundamentally changed. And, people were generating garbage SEO content, a bunch of slop already using, third world workers and, the AIs that did exist like Jarvis, which were far less good than the AIs we have to work with now. But there was a brief period of time when the AI content generation was available to everybody and most people weren't using it. And the people that got on that train, in the first year and a half of it and generated content that was actually useful. So, when it comes to content, I think, the first judge, you have to write it for people. People first, AI and SEO second. If you don't write for humans, it doesn't matter because it's never going to convert. So if I generate a bunch of traffic that never converts into a customer, screw it, it doesn't matter. So first it has to answer the questions that people actually ask Google, which as far as AIs go, Google is the biggest AI, because Gemini is built into over 50% of Google searches. So the results of that AI, I guess I've jumped all over the place here, but those people who generated a bunch of content during that first year and a half or so of AI content generation being available, really saw a lot of impact from it. But that impact has now fallen off quite a bit along, for a lot of them. But that content, if you're going to write SEO content and you're going to use AI to do it, you have to think about the humans first. You have to write human first content that is also structured for the bots. And that structuring for the bots is your heading tags, it's the content itself, it's the images, the alt tags on the images, it's schema markup if you have products or you have FAQs or you have business content, business addresses, those kind of things. But humans first, machines second is my general strategy for that.
So what is the playbook around paid ads versus SEO? You touched on how a lot of brands, certainly in the beginning stages of growing their business, don't have the budgets to turn to SEO because of the time frames. Yet at the same time, paid ads is a never-ending hamster wheel of investment.
Totally.
How have you seen the right balance? Because I think everyone listening is going to understand there's a balance, going to understand the upsides of both. Makes sense to people. But the balance, getting that balance right, now that's the tricky part. What's the order of operations? What are the tips along the way? When do you shift budget towards something else? When do you pull back, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, I generally think that from an ad standpoint, you have to make sure that the ad campaign is not just revenue positive, but it's profit positive. So you have to look at margin dollars, not just revenue dollars. And this is one of the shortfalls of a lot of agencies is they're like, well, look, we've got you at 2-to-1 ROI on, your ROAS is 2-to-1, we're doubling your money. And the truth is his costs are 50% of his sales, or maybe they're 70% of his sales. He could be losing money on every dollar he's spending because his real return on ad spend has to be 3 before he breaks even. So knowing what your real break even is, I think is absolutely a critical first step. So if you know your true break even is 3, then you have to make better than 3. And any dollar that you can make better than 3, is worth considering spending. It's not necessarily worth spending, but if you can be doing a spend at 6 or 8 or 10 times return on ad spend, and 3 is where you make money, like I will pour money into that machine till it stops producing more money. And my general rule of thumb is that you can get your impression share up to somewhere between 60 and 75% in most realms before you see a dramatic increase in your cost per conversion or cost per click. But there's always a point of diminishing returns. There's no unending well of leads or clicks. Well, there's clicks, but those are bots. But not real leads or real sales. There's a limited amount of opportunity in every market. So you've got to really consider what the actual market opportunity is, when you look at how far will this scale. And, as you also probably know, in Google Ads, it won't tell you where you're at in the market on your opportunity until you cross 10%. Mm-hmm. So you'll just see less than 10% in your Google Ads console until you hit 10%. And it may take you $5,000 or $10,000 a month to hit 10% if you have keywords that are high demand keywords in there. So sculpting your keywords, choosing that balance between demand and intent is another secret. I mean, it's not a secret. It's just a smart tactic. You've got to find where's that balance where you get enough traffic and the traffic has enough intent. If you're selling, yellow polka dot sneakers, you don't want to just bid on sneakers because you're going to blow all your budget on people who don't want it.
Talk a bit about that, because I think that's always a great area to dive deeper into is especially in the beginning days of someone setting up an ad, I don't want to say ad account, but setting up their ad process and their ad investments.
Yeah.
How do you look at where to put the budget in terms of the type of content you're going to have on your site? You're going to probably have a homepage. Folks, don't direct any of your traffic there. You're probably going to have
unless they're searching for you by name. If they're searching for you by name, branded searches can go to your homepage, but nothing else. Nothing else.
Fair enough. Okay, we got a homepage. Good. We've got landing pages or service pages that contain what you do. You've also got kind of comparison pages. You've got blog posts. You've got informative content. You've got other types of mediums, media that perhaps you've created. So where and how do you structure a good ad campaign, perhaps at the beginning, but also as you develop?
Well, generally speaking, I look for where is the highest intent first. So, when it's, if it's a plumber in San Francisco, I'm going to go after those localized plumbing related keywords first. If it's a fishing retailer who's doing e-commerce, I'm going to be searching for like specific product models, and I'm going to be using Merchant Center to integrate everything so that I'm pulling the feed directly from Shopify or whatever e-commerce platform, and that it's synchronizing anytime a new product sells, so I know whether it's in stock or not. And I'm sending that traffic directly to the product pages. So, if it's a service, ideally you have a custom version of your service landing page that is, specifically targeting that type of keyword or that type of traffic. And then once you've got that dialed in, then you can expand to the next level, which, could actually be in either direction. So if you've got those like that general localized plumbing, you might go to do water heaters or sump pumps, or, you might go to garbage disposals, or you might expand to, just the keyword plumber, but, we're geographically targeting it and locking it in geographically. But you're going to, on the, the more specific searches, you're going to probably have a higher return. You're going to have a higher conversion rate, but you're going to have far less traffic. If you got 50 leads a month from, those localized plumbing searches, you might get 5 or 10 from water heaters, and you've got to know that if I go down this, longer tail keyword space, I'll probably convert better, but I'm going to get less opportunity. And if I go the other direction, I won't convert as well, but there will be far more opportunity in that lake.
And you have to just basically test a lot of this, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
see what converts.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And create ad groups within to separate, if the keyword ties to this specific ad, you want to break those out. So they're, because Google what they really want is a seamless experience where the ad that the visitor sees ties in, that the keyword they searched or the search term they search ties into your keyword well, which ties into your ad copy well, which ties into your landing page well. And that seamless experience for the customer or the potential customer for you gives Google something that Google's happy about, and they call that a good quality score.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I have another question here. Really quickly, though, I want to just jump in and pause to mention today's sponsor, Quiet Light. And if you've ever wondered what your business might be worth or whether there's a path to eventually stepping away from it, Quiet Light is worth a look. So their team is made up of people who've actually built, bought, and sold businesses. So their advice is going to be grounded in real experience. You always work with one advisor from the beginning to the end, and they take a very curated approach. And what that means is that your business is vetted instead of just being tossed into like a big marketplace. And maybe most importantly, they're known for being very straightforward and honest through the entire process, giving you an accurate read about your business. So you can get a free and confidential valuation at quietlight.com. Again, just go to quietlight.com if you want to get an idea for what your business is worth. So I want to dive in to how this all relates to SEO, but I have one more question as it relates to the ad side of things, if we can. And that is a common thing I hear all the time, whether it's from clients at my agency, I run an SEO agency, or whether it's just people that we interview or we talk to, or the questions that we see posted. And that is, when we get into the Google Ads world, there's really the LSA side of things, and then there's really more of a traditional ad approach. Totally. Can you touch on that for people who maybe have ambiguity around that, or people who are wondering which direction might be best to consider? Like, can you give some definition and some perspective on your experience with them?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm quite experienced with local service ads as well as regular ads. And local service ads only are available to specific niches. So businesses that are service businesses primarily, and they recently expanded to include home services were a big thing, but they also include some kinds of lawyers, some kinds of medical professionals, yoga studios, and other random smatterings of things. Google has a page where they'll tell you exactly what that list is, but there's 30 or so different niches that are allowed to do local service ads. And local service ads was Google's response to companies like Angie's List and Home Advisor and Yelp dominating the organic search results for local search for businesses. So if I was looking for an HVAC company in Loveland, Colorado here, and I searched it, the top 10 results were all aggregators. And so none of the local businesses were able to unseat these big national companies that had hundreds of thousands of pages of content. And so Google said, hey, we could make some money off of this situation and solve this for all these small businesses. We'll do something that's very helpful for them by selling them a pay-per-lead ad rather than a pay-per-click ad. And it requires validation of licensure and validation of registration of your business with the Secretary of State. And, so there's some hoops you have to go through to become Google verified to run LSA. And then there are only historically, there have been 3 to 5 spots that show up at the very top. And they say Google verified. They used to say Google guaranteed, but Google reworked that system just a few months ago and decided they didn't want to guarantee anything. They just want to say they verified it. A little liability mitigation there. But Google verifies you. And now what I've been reading is that the latest research says that with the AI summaries, if there's an AI summary, the likelihood is there's only 1 to 3 LSA results that are showing above now. So the number of businesses that are getting that opportunity is decreasing. And, as we've seen with AI and SEO, it's becoming more of a winner takes all situation than it was just a year ago. As I mentioned earlier, over 50% of Google searches now have AI summaries. And the latest thing I read said that by the end of 2026, they're estimating 75% of Google searches will have AI summaries. So my expectation is that this is all going to go the direction of, hey Siri, I need my HVAC fixed, which we know that and then it'll say Brown and Sons Plumbing and HVAC is available on Tuesday at 4 p.m. to fix your HVAC. Would you like me to make that appointment for you? Their minimum fee is $289 for a service charge. And if I say, no, that's too expensive, they'll say, well, Jones HVAC is available on Wednesday at 3 p.m. and they only charge $92 for their service fee. Would you like me to book that one? And, then I'll say yes, and it'll book it. And, this is not a reality yet, but we've I've been saying this is going to happen for about 2 years now. And about 2 months ago, Amazon launched a partnership with Expedia to do concierge AI travel booking, which is absolutely what I'm talking about here. And the companies like House Call Pro and Service Titan already have those integrations for the home service businesses with Google Reserve and LSA booking, booking widget integration. So the data integrations are there, and it's just a matter of time for, and Google's the best position because they've got LSA, they've already validated, they've already vetted these companies. But Amazon and Apple and Meta, not Facebook, Meta, all of the AI systems are going to want to play in that same game.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. The in that vein, the transition to talking about traditional search, SEO, when to make that investment, how to make that investment, how to use what you learn from the ad side of things to fuel your SEO. And I think a lot of people do look at them as almost like two sides of the coin. Perhaps a lot of people view them as two necessary sides of the coin. You have heads and you have tails. You can't have a coin without both. But how do you see them blending together? How do you see them fueling each other? Specifically, if you've done ads first or you've invested in paid, how does that fuel your SEO?
So if you got to have enough money to fund whatever you're doing. So I think that small businesses often fail because they try to do too many things at once, and they overextend themselves and try to spend more time and energy and money on things. And really, if you don't have focus and do one thing really well, you're going to piss all your money away in every direction. So I think you're best off picking one and getting it dialed in first. That one might be local service ads. That one might be blogging. If you are small and you've got some word of mouth and you're busy enough that you can keep yourself mostly busy, and you've now hired somebody to help you out, and you're like, well, I could put, my niece on writing blogs for me, and she can write five blogs a week for the next 6 or 9 months. And we've got a strategy for it, because, if you're going to do blogging, you got to have a strategy. There's so many random acts of marketing where people are just like, well, everybody's saying I got a blog, so I'm going to blog. And they just spew a bunch of stuff that nobody cares about. You got to find out what people ask Google first. You got to do the keyword research and the search term research, find out what the questions are that people are asking Google and Microsoft, and, the types of questions people are asking the AI are fundamentally different than the search terms that people were typing into Google just 2 or 3 years ago. And so we've got to adjust our content generation strategy to connect to what people are actually doing today, because it's not just targeting keywords. We got to look at, obviously we have to consider keywords, but we also have to look at what is it that people are actually typing in, and how are people using AI as a decision engine and not just a search engine, because they're using it to inform their decision before they ever click on any website.
What are the biggest mistakes you see people making as they try to blend both of these? Common mistakes. And again, a lot of people listening are going to be small operators, so they're probably hands-on on it. They're probably very hands-on in the process. And you talked about doing too many things leads to often failure. Having budgets, having to maximize the budgets you have. What are the big mistakes people are making?
Well, when it comes to Google Ads, having somebody incompetent manage your Google Ads
that sounds like a lesson for all of life.
I was just helping my daughter. My daughter is getting married this fall, and she traded her wedding videographer some services doing Google Ads management for him, because he had spent like 10 grand on somebody else, and they had just flushed that money down the toilet. And of course, being a caring dad, I sat down and spent a couple hours with her going over these campaigns, and they were horrible. I mean, like, it was, this guy only wants to shoot weddings, and he only wants to shoot video at weddings, and only wants to do it in like a very specific targeted geographic area. And the person was running keywords, running search nationally, the entire United States. They had no keywords. They were running every keyword that Google suggested, but no negatives. So Google suggested, commercial photographer. And, they didn't know what they were doing. And there's so many people who throw their hat in the ring and say, oh yeah, I can do Google Ads. And, you don't have to have a degree to say you can run Google Ads, but like, vet those people. If you're not learning to do it yourself and doing it yourself, like, know what questions to ask those people. What's their strategy for negative keywords? What are the keywords we're going to target first? What's the geographic area we're going to target first? How are we going to test these ads? Are we going to A/B? Are we going to make edits? If we don't have enough traffic, we may have to just time A/B, and we're only going to run one ad group, but we're going to make a change, and we're going to see if that change is positive or negative. If we don't have very much budget and we can't, you have to get an understanding of like, what's the level of competence of this person that you're engaging with if you're going to hire somebody to do Google Ads. And same thing's true with SEO. You know this as well as I do. Like, 80% of the people out there hanging an SEO shingle are absolute sharks and idiots. They don't know what they're doing. They haven't done this before. They have no proven track record, and they're just looking to take some money, to make some easy money until they get fired. So, be very careful with who you hire if you're not doing it yourself. And if you're doing it yourself, like, all the data's out there now. When I started doing this, like, it was all trial and error. Nobody had YouTube channels dedicated to educating you about SEO or Google Ads, which has its plus and minus, because a lot of those people are incompetent too. But, there's so much information now that wasn't there when I got started at this. And you got started at this, become educated yourself before you go spending a bunch of money. At least, get a base level of understanding of targeting, and a base level understanding of how keywords and search terms work if you're going to buy ads.
Let's assume that people have that knowledge about both ads and SEO. They're a little bit past that beginner stage. What are some big mistakes that they can pay attention to at that point? I guess I'm looking for more mistakes people can avoid. That's really what I'm looking for, is like, people that listen are like, hey man, I want to try this or that, but I really want to avoid making that mistake. Maybe I don't hire the guy who blows my $10,000 ad budget, but how do I not be the guy who blows my $10,000 ad budget?
Yeah, don't blow my own $10,000. So targeting things that aren't going to convert, would be one. Both on SEO and on ads. In Google Ads, you can absolutely accidentally target things that won't convert, because Google recently expanded to make their matches even more broad, which is extra annoying. In the last 3 months or so, Google's matching algorithm got more broad. So phrase match is more like broad used to be 10 years ago. An exact match is more like phrase used to be. So, and of course, man, I get hammered every day with emails from Google reps who are like, let me help you optimize your campaign. You're missing out on opportunities because you don't have enough broad keywords in your campaigns. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want broad keywords in my campaigns. They're just a way to flush that money down the toilet. But inadequate number of negative keywords is often, I review our campaigns at least once every couple of weeks to look at, are we wasting money targeting competitors? I think targeting competitors right out of the gate is something a lot of people do that's a bad move. because conversion rate on targeting competitors is usually very low because they've already decided who they want to do business with. And unless it's a versus search that includes you, like the odds are you're not going to convert that, and they're in the research stage if they're doing a versus search. So the question is, how far up the funnel do you want to be bidding? And I would start down very low in the funnel at the zero moment of truth where they're getting ready to buy the thing. And then we can work up from there. But, again, we got to pick our point of starting. And on the SEO side, I absolutely made this mistake myself 15 years ago, targeting some things that were absolutely not going to convert. And I didn't think about it. But we went to the E3. My brother had an invention that he created. It was awesome. We went to the E3 Expo in LA, and I took a bunch of photos of the booth babes there holding his device. And, all of those pictures of all the babes were ranking, and they were ranking for keywords like booth babes. And, none of those converted. Shockingly, guys that were looking for pretty girls in pictures did not convert into buying his product. So, I have failed at this myself. We've all done things like that. If you've been around for going on 30 years doing this kind of stuff, we've all made mistakes. And, targeting things that won't convert is something I still see all the time with my service customers as well, where, they'll get a lot of traffic that's national traffic, but they only service a local area, and it's for services they might do. But, 99% of those people are not in their market, and it really doesn't matter. It's just creating extra load on their server. It's not really benefiting them.
I'm glad you touched on that. I wanted to ask maybe a follow-up question. What is a realistic expectation for people in terms of failure? And I'm using air quotes because most of the time, for example, in SEO, you're going to write 20 blog posts, and only 2 or 3 of them, if you're lucky, are really going to generate significant measurable traffic, right? But you can't go back and be like, well, I shouldn't do this because 18 of 20 were a failure. Well, to some degree, you can learn from it, but you have to write 20 to find the wins. And extrapolating that to ad campaigns and to this entire ecosystem of ads plus SEO, what is a good and reasonable expectation of how many ads are going to hit, of how many pieces of content are going to hit from what you see, like with the clients you work with? What sort of expectations do you have about that from a high level perspective?
Well, my general expectation with ads is it takes 2 to 3 months to dial in an ad campaign successfully. And that means probably somewhere between 4 and 6 rounds of revisions before, we're at positive ROI. And, you run it for a week or two, depending on how much traffic you're sending to that campaign. And you're going to see that half that traffic is garbage. Even if you set up everything, anticipating as much as you can, I just expect that half the traffic's going to be garbage. If you're lucky, it's only 30%, but then you block that half, 30 to 50% that's garbage. And so that never shows up again. And then we review the ad and say, hey, how can we make these headlines or descriptions more compelling? Can we improve these images? And even when you already you start out pretty darn good, I'll be able to read through those headlines and say, okay, these 3 are kind of lame. We can do better. Let's improve these 3. These are our 3 worst. Let's make those better. And so if we're incrementally able to improve that campaign by 20 or 30% in that first revision, and then a week or 2 later, we do the same thing, and we're able to probably not get quite as much bang for the buck on that round of edits because we've already hit the lowest hanging fruit. But say we've improved it 10 or 15%, and then we do it again, and we do it again, and we do it again. By the time we've done that 6 times, we're going to have a campaign that runs pretty well. And then Google will change something in a couple months, and it will stop running as well, and we'll have to go in and adjust it. because Google does it. And this is one of the things that clients don't realize. They're like, well, why did our campaign go from a 5x ROI to 1.5 in just a month? And I'm like, because Google's changed something, and I'm not tracking this every day. And your sales cycle is not a 1-day sales cycle. So, it's at least 2 weeks before I know whether, I have a reasonably accurate ROI number on the lead that came in today. So there's no way to know this immediately. But when I look at 30 days of data, I can say, Google must have changed something. Let's go look at those keywords. And sure enough, we've got a bunch of competitors now showing up in our brand campaign that obviously we're not bidding on them, but Google decided that this was a good match. We ran an exact match of our name, and somehow that's matching generic keywords now. But, you got to play the game that's there to play.
Sounds like that's a story that happened in real life.
In the last 3 months, that happened.
A recent story that happened in the last couple of months.
Absolutely.
This has been very insightful. And I want to pause and ask you, where can people follow along with what you're doing, or if they want to learn more about what you do?
So my business website is wizardofadsonline.com. And that is where, if I do post blogs, that's where those go. And that's where my business lives. If you want my music, I keep seeing this picture of me as a kid in our family band. You can go to ViTheFiddler.com for that, just for kicks. But yeah, all of my SEO and digital strategy and Google Ads management services are available through Wizard of Ads Online.
V, this is a very interesting interview. I appreciate you coming on board. And, it's a good discussion to have at this point in the ecosystem of where things are going, because I'm sure a lot of people on both sides of the coin, the ad side and the SEO side, are looking for more access to traffic and to leads, most importantly.
Absolutely.
So having that high level conversation. And before we do take off, just a really quick reminder about today's sponsor who makes this podcast able to happen, and that's Quiet Light. And so as a reminder, if you're curious about what your business could be worth, what it could sell for, or maybe you're just simply trying to understand your options for down the road, Quiet Light can help you out. What stands out about them is that their advisors are actual operators, not just brokers. These are people who've been through this process themselves, and you get one point of contact from the valuation all the way to your closing. So it makes it a lot more personal, a lot less chaotic. They carefully vet businesses and buyers, and it's not just a big, giant open marketplace. So you can get a free and confidential valuation at quietlight.com. Again, that's quietlight.com. Big thanks to them for supporting this podcast. V, we'll talk to you again soon. Until then, thanks again.
Hey, thanks a lot, Jared. Pleasure to be here.